From folklore and fairies
to monsters and mysteries, it came from the Maritimes. The vaguely human shape moving swiftly through the woods at night. My co-host, Chelsea.
Howling at the full moon. My co-host, Evan.
Hi everyone. Welcome to It Came From The Maritimes. Today we will be discussing the metamorphic mystery of the Lunenburg Werewolf. Before starting this story, I want to give a warning that in this episode there will be discussion of murder, including that of children, suicide, incest, sexual assault, witch trials, and mental illness. After that long list here, we're going to get right into things.
So I feel like that list makes it sound like a little dark, but based on everything Evan's told me about this story, I am still very excited to listen to it. I think it's going to be a really good one.
Yeah, I will say that the story itself is dark, but there's also some of the things that are not related to this one story.
And it's dark in a fascinating, historical way.
Yeah. So this story starts with a young girl named Nanette in December of 1755. She was left homeless and without a family by the expulsion of the Acadians. She had lived by herself for some time and learned how to hunt and forage before eventually finding a band of Mi'kmaq people who took her in. At the time, there was a German settlement in the area of Lunenburg, and when the band traveled to trade with them, she was left behind with other people of European descent. Nanette grew up to be known as a town beauty, and many of the local men admired her skill at hunting and fishing. While there were many suitors, it was a strong German man by the name of Hans Gerhardt who won her heart. He was known to be quick to anger and have a smile filled with big, strong, sharp, white teeth. While many found him to be abrasive, Nanette was used to living in the wild and wasn't bothered by his behavior. He could be described as overprotective of Nanette, but some said he was loyal, like a dog at her side.
Honestly, I feel for Nanette because I'm sure after being essentially left as a child, having someone that was strong and supportive, even if it was overbearing, it still would have been almost a relief at times compared to the life of isolation she led at so many points.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing. She wouldn't necessarily be used to the regular conventions of all the social skills and different things like that either.
Exactly.
After a year of marriage, Nanette gave birth to a baby girl named Marie. While Nanette was delighted to take care of the girl, Hans grew resentful of the attention given to the newborn baby. He started to spend more time alone in the woods, saying he was hunting, and he would sleep alone in the kitchen, sometimes sneaking out for additional hunting trips at night. Despite the extra hunting trips, he rarely brought home more than before, and when Nanette asked him, he simply revealed his shining pointed canine teeth in a smile and slunk out the door.
Honestly, he sounded like a real handful.
I think he was. Around the time, there were reports from local farmers of a mysterious beast skulking around the outskirts of town at night. The monster was known as large, hairy beast and was sometimes on two legs, but was also seen on all fours to run and hunt. It had been seen following people closely at night, and livestock were found in their fields with their throats torn and blood drained out, while others were missing altogether. Younger people had theories of it being a wolf or a bear, but the older folk in town had more supernatural ideas. There was a tale of a man long ago who had eaten a wolf. The wolf stayed inside the man and ate everything that he did, and when the full moon came, it was said that the wolf would take over and would become more animal than man, though no one knew the name of the man or if he was still alive.
Ooh.
By the late summer, it was blueberry season, and Nanette tucked Marie into her cradle while her and Hans went to pick berries. He seemed to be moving inhumanly fast, and after only moments, he told Nanette that he was going to go empty his basket at the house, and he would return soon to pick more. Hans took a while to return, but Nanette assumed that he was checking on the baby and took her time filling her basket before returning to the house. Nanette returned to find the house surprisingly quiet, and was anxious to find both Hans and Marie were gone. She asked for help of local farmers, who made a search party. When the farmers did find Hans, he was found on all fours and snarling at them, snapping at them with his sharp teeth. His eyes were yellow, and he appeared more beast than man. They managed to overpower him and tied him up, before finding what little remains were left of Marie after Hans's meal. They locked him in a jail overnight, and when the full moon rose that night, howling could be heard coming from the cell. The next morning, town officials decided that he was to be hanged, but it didn't matter, as he was found in a pool of blood, with his veins torn from his arms with his own teeth.
Oh my gosh, that's so gory.
Yeah.
Do you know, where was he found with her? Was it near the house?
It didn't really say in the story. It seems like it was in the surrounding area.
Yeah. Oh, so creepy.
Yeah. And it said that to this day, he is buried in an unmarked grave in the cemetery on Gallows Hill in Lunenburg.
So were there ever and I know the stories don't necessarily tell this, but were there ever any rumors about I don't know, his family history or obviously there was a certain degree, he was not well, but.
Yeah, there wasn't really information. I do find it interesting, that whole thing about the man who ate the wolf. So it seems like the older people knew something about this. So it seems like maybe it could have been a relative of his before him, that this was a trait in the family, or it's hard to say because the story only goes so in depth.
Yeah, because part of me wonders if maybe he heard that story at some point and he took on the persona after hearing it, or maybe it was just his family's curse.
Yeah, and it doesn't give enough details to say.
Very interesting stuff. Sad. Very sad.
Oh, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about werewolves in a broader sense, because I found that this kind of didn't fully align with what I think of as werewolves. Werewolves I'm used to seeing in movies and TV shows is usually kind of two discrete forms. They're a human, or they're wolf form, or some sort of man-wolf hybrid. But it seems like a lot of the older stories and different folklore stories seem to have more about people who take on wolf-like qualities, and they might transform some, but it's usually that they still have some wolf qualities in their human form. And I found Hans kind of seemed like that. He wasn't a wolf when they found him. He was just a feral man almost who had wolf-like qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Lycanthropy, or being a werewolf, is displayed in many different ways. It is often seen as a disease that is spread by a bite or scratch, though sometimes it is a curse or some other form of magic that causes a transformation when there's a full moon. So that's kind of how you see it in different media there. Many countries actually have their own versions of werewolves, which kind of matches their local wildlife. So the were hyenas in Africa, were tigers in India, were pumas in South America. And it makes sense that people would be afraid of things that they associate with large, dangerous animals, especially if they give those creatures more human intelligence. And then also, until the 20th century, wolf attacks were very common in England and many other places, so it makes sense that people would be afraid of wolves in general, and in particular werewolves. Depending on who you ask in folklore or different media, lycanthropy has different cures. These include long periods of physical activity, wolfsbane, saying their Christian name 3 times, converting the person to Christianity, in particular with devotion to Saint Hubert, scolding the werewolf, exorcism, surgery, including striking them in the head with a knife.
Well, that would do it.
As is probably evident with that last one, some of the more severe cures were often fatal, so I don't know if striking someone in the head with a knife is curing lycanthropy or so much as killing them.
Right. I remember one of the psych courses I took in university, because as many other people, I studied a major in psychology. I remember there was one of the courses that talked about different psychiatric conditions. And lycanthropy, it's rare, but they're diagnosed with it because it's a form of a psychotic episode. So it's people who have dissociative identity disorder, bipolar disorder, severe cases of schizophrenia. It's how their symptoms are produced. I find, it's just...
Yeah, and that it's interesting you bring that up. That's on my list to talk about later here.
Nice.
So there's many other methods that were known for killing werewolves, including silver bullets, silver weapons, or destruction of the brain or heart. And many believe that if the body was not destroyed after killing the werewolf, that could come back to life.
Do you know how they destroyed it? Just cremating?
Yeah, usually with fire. You can kind of, I don't want to go too in depth. There's some stories I'll talk about later that tell you everything, but it's a little bit distressing almost to read. So I don't fully say it all. Just to go back to, where did the stories of werewolves start? Some people believe that has an origin with Horios, which was a group of teenage men who were sent out as a band of fighters as a rite of passage. It was seen in many cultures, such as Greek, Irish, Iranian, Norse. It seems like it was pretty universal in that Eurasia area, and it was seen as early as 500 AD. They were known to go out raiding, looting, and sexually assaulting women. They often wore wolf skins and would act in ways similar to animals. And it is thought that this was going to allow them to live without human taboo during their time in the group. And then when they would return to society as grown men, they would feel like they wouldn't need to have remorse for their actions, as the animals had been the one to do the harm and not their human forms.
Oh,
they would
gosh.
literally, if they were wearing a wolf skin, they would literally shed their skin and say, no, now I'm just a regular human, because they were often people who were lower ranking in well-off or noble families. So it'd be like the fourth or fifth born son of like a noble person. So they would never have rank.
What a cop-out for behaving like a jerk.
I know. So obviously this relates to werewolves because it's taking on a different form, and then you do unspeakable things, and then a lot of werewolf stories, they're just a regular person society afterwards. It's like nothing ever happened.
Well, and I feel like being part of a group too, there's almost that like group psychosis that could kick in, because it's like if everyone around you is doing it, then it's, I don't know, what do they call it? Like folie à deux, like when there's multiple people who almost like share this like delusion or something like that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. And I just kind of was doing some general werewolf research as one does.
As you do.
And I came across that. So I also found that through the Middle Ages, werewolf stories were really common. And by late Middle Ages, there was actually a lot of werewolf trials, very similar to how there were witch trials.
Oh, I never heard.
Yeah. One of the well-known ones was a man named Peter Stump, or the Werewolf of Bedburg. He was a wealthy farmer who was born in what is now Germany around 1530. Stump may not have been his actual name, but instead a reference to the fact that he was missing a hand, which many related to a paw that they claimed to have cut off in his werewolf form.
Oh my goodness.
In 1589, there was a trial where he confessed to being a werewolf after being tortured by being stretched on a rack. He claimed to have practiced magic since he was 12 years old, and that the devil gave him a belt which would give him the following magic transformation: the likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body, and mighty paws. Yeah, he claimed that for 25 years he had eaten women, including 2 pregnant women for their fetuses, children, goats, and sheep. One of the children he reportedly ate was his own son, who he dearly loved, but said that the bloodlust took over and he couldn't help himself. He was also accused of having an incestuous relationship with his daughter and having a sexual relationship with a succubus sent to him by the devil.
This guy.
Yeah, a lot going on here. This was tortured out of him, so I feel like there's always some weird stuff, but yeah. He was executed in a brutal way, along with his daughter and mistress. It's very graphic. You can find the details online if you're interested. I know even on Wikipedia there was pretty in-depth explanation. And as a warning to others to avoid black magic, they erected a pole with a torture wheel decorated with a picture of a wolf with Stump's severed head on top.
Oh my God. The 1500s, they didn't mess around.
No, yeah. So there was a lot going on. So one thing that really surprised me was just that werewolves were kind of a thing, because you hear about witch trials all the time, but I'd never really heard of werewolf trials.
No, I had never once heard of any sort of werewolf trial, which is weird because I feel like it's the type of thing that I usually know about. But it's tough because like some of the stuff he's claiming to do, like it's downright atrocious. But you had a good point earlier where it was tortured out of him. And I know during the witch trials, it's like the horrendous things they did to these women. They would claim to sign the devil's book and do so many more awful things just to finally be freed. So it's, oh my goodness, though, if he did like 1% of the things he claimed to have done, still not a good man.
I will say that werewolf trials, it seemed like it was a lot more common in mainland Europe, and in particular kind of like German and all like Nordic areas. So that might be why you don't hear it as much. So it does seem like the werewolf trials were in many ways similar to the witch trials, because they gave people the ability to do away with those that they see as bad or different, basically. Also, it seemed like there were many cases where the people who were accused were more than likely serial killers or cannibals, but not necessarily actually transforming. It's hard to believe testimonies were reliable with the threat of torture or after they were actually tortured. Also, as we talked about earlier, there is the clinical condition called clinical lycanthropy, where people do believe that they are transforming into these animals, and sometimes they do cause harm to others, so it is possible that it is just a genuine mental illness. One other thing I want to talk about is where no one actually sees him transform into a werewolf, there are some other similar things that could be related from folklore that I just want to bring up. One of them is the popular legend of the Wendigo, which is a malevolent spirit of Algonquin folklore that possesses humans and causes them to have an insatiable hunger for other humans. He doesn't necessarily transform in any way, it just seems like he's cannibalistic and feral, so could this have been a Wendigo rather than a werewolf? And some people say that you can become a Wendigo due to greed. In the story of the Lunenburg Werewolf, it was his greed for Nanette's attention that set him over the edge and turned him into the beast that he was. Is it possible that it was something different? We will never know.
Evan, thank you so much for sharing that horrifying but absolutely fascinating story about the Lunenburg Werewolf. It is interesting. I know I have heard a bit about the legend of the Wendigo, and I remember there was one story I read. Now, this was a fictional story, but I'm assuming it was based on the folklore, where they said that a Wendigo could be created by a man cannibalizing another man.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's an interesting piece of folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of It Came From The Maritimes. You can find us on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and now TikTok at It Came From The Maritimes, on X at ICFT Maritimes. If you have any Atlantic Canada folklore you would like to see covered in future episodes, or any spooky encounters of your own, please email us at itcamefromthemaritimes@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please feel free to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps people find us. And we have a little folklore tip we'd like to end our episode with. Evan, do you have one for us today?
Yeah, our folklore tip is, if you shiver unexpectedly, it's a sign someone is walking over your grave.
Very spooky.
Mm-hmm.